So I'm looking at, the Egyptian architecture. I'm looking at the stuff from the Mesopotamia, Inca and Mayan. I have all the reference laid out again on my second monitor that I've done in my research, and I'm picking and drawing from certain parts, from many cultures. That's kind of the fun challenge in this. I mean, if you want to, by all means, like I did with the kind of like the first two silhouettes up there, you can stick purely in one culture, just Egyptian or just Mayan. But then as you get further, along with developing some silhouettes and some shapes, try mixing and matching. And that's when you can really kind of create interesting and new and original shape designs. So I'm thinking of like having like the square-based structure kind of emerging from this kind of more traditional pyramid base, with again this more kind of Mayan tower that's extruding out the top with this grand stairway that we kind of looked at, in some of the references. So again, this simple shape, well, it's not that simple actually. It's a lot more complex than what we've drawn so far, but it's at least taking from three different forms of the reference that we've kind of looked at already. So again, I'm going to draw another one. And just to kind of keep things in terms of this shape, I tended to go on the inside a little too quick on the first one. So kind of more ideally, this may be how you want to do it, is just kind of stick with your outside shape, If you're, again, making it symmetrical, do that now. And I can see at this point, yeah, it's maybe still a tad too simple. I got the kind of core geometric shape figured out, but it's missing a little bit of that flair, a little bit of that interest. So that's when I have to, if I want to make something look more iconic and more memorable, I'll have to go up and figure out how I want to do a little bit of set dressing in terms of the design on how this structure looks up here. So I'm going to begin to add a little more tweaks up here, like, little bits of, that I've seen in the old Aztec stuff, and a little bit of more of, just those head patterns up there. And then I'm thinking, that this shape, this rectangle that I drew is interesting, but I could further subdivide it by making it two extruding shapes would again add a level of interest and complexity. If we make things just so simple and so expected, unless we're going for something historically accurate, we can lose the audience's attention, and we won't tend to be as inspirational or draw as much interest if we're just playing it too safe. That's why I'm like, I start simple and then add the layers of complexity to it. Like, even if I'm going to draw some pillars up here, if I want to show that there is a little bit of space behind them, I'll just shade in a little area like that. That way I know. And something else, too, to keep in mind that pertains just to the linear method like this, if I'm drawing them, is attention to your line weight. Now, I'm not showing the most prime example of this. I'll go back and fix it for you after so I can show, but if a line's coming in front of another line, or if it's an overlap hanging on something below it, right, you want to make the line a bit thicker. It's called line weight. Comic art is, or ink things are really kind of famous for it. But a good traditional drawing, in a sense, can certainly have a line weight, and that's an important factor of it as well. And that kind of plays into your draftsmanship as well. I'm not necessarily going to teach draftsmanship, but in situations like this, if I can point out a tip or trick to you that will help, the overall presentation of your pieces or your designs stand out and work a little bit better, then yeah, I'll surely kind of mention it. So again, if you want to speed up your process, here's a few other tricks. I literally designed one half, as you saw me do a few times, but the way I kind of arrange it and scale it, I can make, three other shapes from that one half I drew. And then, again, once you figure out the silhouette, I want you to figure out the interior shapes of it, what makes it up. So that's really kind of the important aspect of it, is, information. So I've drawn a few of them at this point. I kind of did a little bit of time lapse because I was just kind of repeating what I've already kind of done several times. But I've got a nice little set of line here, and as you can see, when I add the human scale to these, we have many different sizes of temples. So scale is a huge factor in this, and it's important to kind of make note of that. And again, this one I'm kind of showing a little bit more again of that line weight. I'm trying to like soften up a little the lines. This is as simple of a shape it looks like. It's going to have a lot of depth to it, and the way to show that with such a flat kind of two-dimensional drawing is that line weight. So things I'm going to use a thicker line, up front, and a thinner line for the details and things that recede into the background. So again, I'm erasing that a little bit. I lowered my brush. If I drew the closer lines at a 6, I'm dropping to a 5 or a 4 to draw these things in the background. Like so. And this is again just a play off the simple ziggurat shape, just to kind of show you. And again, if I want to show things are extruding or extending out beyond in a planar surface type of way, I can just go and take those shapes again and maybe just add a little bit of rough shading. Doesn't have to be anything too crazy or involved, but just a little bit to show that, okay, that goes in, this comes out, and so on and so forth. Now I'm thinking too, yeah, you know what? I didn't really introduce trees or any kind of foliage in any of these sketches, and that was like a big part of it. So again, a mental note for that: you can flesh and deck these things out to make them as beautiful or as interesting as you want to. There we go. We got my tree, so we got a nice lush garden up there. And again, if we're working on our presentation as well with the whole time of these things, and we're talking about silhouette design. If I didn't already, I'll go back on the layer below and I'll just make a solid fill layer, like so, essentially staying in the shapes, so I can shut the line layer off and see how it just reads from a silhouette standpoint. I guess that is one advantage of doing the shapes. Is the shape method I showed first is that this kind of this step does it itself, so I don't have to go back. But again, drawing is a really nice release too, because it with being at how linear it is, you have to be super precise, but you can get a lot of detail that you may have a little more trouble getting from the block out technique. So again, whatever you prefer, but once you line your silhouettes up, fill them in the background. At least see now they pop off the page a little bit better. So I'm gonna make a new file just to kind of show how we're kind of going through the workflow here, and where we'll be going. And so that's just we're starting with the silhouette. We're going to the interior details of it, and next we want to take our kind of key designs and see what we can do to make them have form. We have to draw them in perspective, and there's a few ways you can approach this. You can do it isometrically, which is something kind of what I'm doing, where it's more or less like a flat perspective, or you can just outright draw 2 points on a horizon and do 2-point perspective, 2 to 3 point perspective, and just draw it in any 2-point perspective will be fine. But this is the easy way, and it being week 1, I'm going to show you how to do it this way. If some of you have more experience doing this, or experience in perspective, then by all means draw these from any kind of angle you want. But kind of like the key that you'll be doing, at least with the assignment, is taking some shapes, and actually giving them form. That way we're not just looking at a bunch of flat silhouettes. This is a surefire way to help us learn geometry, space, how things work, how they function, and it reinforces our design. How does this function? Does our design work in a sense that we could hand these off to someone in the 3D side of things, and they could actually build a model for them to build and put in the game, or use as a prop in post-production on our set. Either way, there's lots of value in doing this sort of thing, and getting really good at it is certainly a skill we all want to and should get good at, in a sense. So what I'm doing here is I just kind of copy and pasted it, very kind of mirrored like, but as you can see, it's still not adding form to it. It helps us maybe in a flat kind of Google Earth sense see how it could be blocked out, but it's still, we have to go in and do it, basically everything manually. And I kind of start with the corners and the edges and seeing how they line up. So I mean, I wanted to start with this one to show you guys in a little more detail, because I mean, this in itself was a lot more simple compared to the other designs I did. So it's a little more easy to translate, but overall it doesn't take too long. I'm looking at where these lines line up. What is moving back in space, what is coming forward. It's almost like if I was playing like one of those 90s RPGs where they're all in these isometric views, right? And all the buildings kind of look like this. So you can think of it that way if you're having trouble. Again, I'm just analyzing this and deciphering my own drawing up here. We're constantly going back to refer to it, and deciphering how this works. Does this stick out or does it stick in? And again, sticking to the basic kind of shapes. Again, the primitives, the cubes, squares, and then going and adding the secondary details to them. The last step, again, would be to add hints of texture, with my line, if I have the time and want to, again, improve upon the presentation of my piece. Again, I'm working efficiently a little bit on the quick side. I'm still very mindful of how the overall line weight or quality is, but I'm not at this stage. I'm not going out of my way necessarily to make it look like a super pretty drawing. I would probably go back when I'm all done and then clean it up. Though if you do prefer to clean it up as you go, that's certainly viable. There's no right or wrong way. But if you for at least coming back to the homework, if you're turning me in things that I have to decipher because it's not clearly legible, then that's where the problems can be. So it's again good to just build good habits for yourself. Again, I'm just making having these forms make sense like I did on the other side. And again, I don't want a door over here. That just wouldn't make sense. So remember that too, if you're just arbitrarily just kind of copying your own forms around like I did, you'll get to a point like that really you have to definitely make some judgment calls and like, yeah, we don't need 4 doors on a little square house like this. And yeah, that's kind of how we can get our simple silhouette into a kind of, we give it form and make it look more three-dimensional. So that was a simple one. I want to show you one of the more complex ones. I'm not going to go into full detail onto this, but I'll show you the strategies in terms of how you want to execute this. So again, I'm back on my layout sheet, and I want to. Last time I just kind of copy and pasted it and kind of begun there and cleaned it up. So this I'll just kind of draw it from scratch, and I'm going to do it over to the side here because I have a lot more room. I can always shrink it and push it in a kind of place in my layout a little bit later on. So again, I'm just thinking of I'm trying to look at this, and again, this can be one of the trickiest parts. Is like, okay, where do I start? So I'm looking at just the front of it and seeing how it kind of functions. A little bit going in, a little bit going out. A little bit crazy. I'll highlight that in a moment. Which part I was actually trying to decipher first. So here, I'm gonna go in red. Yep, this is exactly the shape I'm just trying to draw as if it were in this perspective. I'll worry about everything else as I go and add it to this. So again, all we're adding and all we're really doing here is drawing stacked rectangles on a kind of like a trapezoid. Like that. And so the next thing I want to figure out is I notice I have like this built-in kind of pyramidal shape in there. But where does that go? That I know it's somewhere on the side, and I can essentially at this stage in the design phase, I can choose how thick this is. So actually with this one, just to kind of change things up, instead of making it more of a square-based pyramid, I'm going to go with something more kind of narrow with it and just kind of draw that in there. Like so. And see, that's how that really kind of translates. And of course, during this perspective, we won't see the other side of it. And if you want to find the center of a rectangle, you just draw an X through it, and where it crosses, that's going to be the center. So again, I'm basing that kind of splitting of this main rectangular shape going down the middle like so, and adding out my ramp, the pink section. That is the next phase. So really to figure out, if you're trying to tackle a complex task such as this, just break it down into individual steps and then add to it. Or in this case, you ultimately just taking away segments as well. But yeah, I'm just cutting into it where I need to. And I have that quick grid I made out, first of all, in the first step there. So I can just move it around from piece to piece and get my drawings kind of remotely accurate. Again, if you don't want to do an isometric view, you can just do any kind of 2-point perspective. And now I'm doing that last part and figuring out where in space this is going to lie. Because see, when we look at them in silhouette, all we can do is see all the components, but we don't know where in Z depth those lie. So we get to pick kind of all that information at this point. Now, once you've done these, and by weeks 2 and 3, after you've kind of gone through the ropes and have a little more experience with this, when you go out to design your silhouettes, you'll be thinking already at this stage in mind, and kind of be designing with that mindset, and essentially just improving your sense. So yeah, I think it'll be very typical that most of your designs and aesthetics will be a lot stronger by weeks 2 and 3 even. Alright, so now moving on to the next part, I'm going to basically be doing what I did. I'm going to find a structure through its silhouette. So I'm going to sketch out a ground plane, and that's going to be the keyword for this little segment here. I'm going to be quickly sketching this out. It's nothing that I would consider to be at a presentation level. And that's just to kind of get the point across, to show you actual new content for this week. This is more or less a quick rehash, just to kind of solidify my design. But this is also realistically how I find my designs too. I either quickly sketch them out with line, or I'll block them out with value. Try either method, whatever works best for you. But this will help me kind of see a lot of the smaller kind of micro shapes of it within the silhouette itself. I can see I have a couple different spires, towers, breaking up different wall segments, and even putting holes like I'm doing here into those. And so what I'll be doing in a minute is just kind of duplicating this and rotating it horizontally to get a mirrored effect, since Photoshop does not have one of those at this time. Because this is supposed to be more or less a symmetrical type of design, a gate to a city, or a gate that is supposed to house the base of an ancient temple, which I'll just more or less throw behind as a supplemental prop to this part, because the focus, or the emphasis will be on the gate here. And so I'm just quickly kind of sketching out some lines or textures or patterns on this. They're entirely optional, but I'm mostly looking for right now a solid kind of silhouette to see if that'll work in a more interesting kind of way. But I'm not going to do anything crazy or time-consuming for this. If you have a stronger imagination, you want to add more and more elements to this, that is fine. This is supposed to here represent a little bit of the ground. I want to firmly kind of place it in a kind of like a desert type of situation. I'll have some kind of drawbridge going over something to it. And I'll just kind of make this small so I can more or less just kind of hint at that temple or that pyramid that it's supposed to be at the base at, just to show more contextual elements. So if you can add more of these kind of contextual elements to where it's going to in the world that it's set in, that's always better. Though not entirely necessary. I may or may not make a comment on it, depending how clear the design is. And so now I'm going to begin to sketch out the final kind of the final concept of that. So I'm using some basic perspective brushes that you can download from the resources. and I'm just kind of blocking in a perspective. So sometimes your image will only be as interesting as well as your perspective, as interesting as your perspective is. So I'm going to do something, a little dynamic, nothing crazy. I have 2-point perspective, and I usually like a safe bet is to do 1 point inside and 1 point outside the actual kind of box. So and that's why I switched up to this kind of format where I can show you the boxes, so I can show you how far the sketch goes out. And I'm going to solidify by first finding out your horizon line. So when you're doing your perspective and mapping everything out, figure out, are you looking up at your scene or are you looking down into your scene? Are you more or less at eye level? And that will adjust, how high that horizon line is. I want to be looking at an eye level, more or less looking up at it, so I'm going to go with a lower horizon line. And if you want to look down from atop something, looking into the city or into your gate, whatever structure you're drawing, then you want to use a higher perspective line. Or horizon line, not perspective line. And with the green, I quickly suggested a lightly suggested a 3-point perspective, just to make it a little bit more natural looking. Things can look a little stiff if you kind of always just go with a flat or straight 2-point perspective. So I'm just trying to find the major towers that I sketched out into the scene. I'm not necessarily caring at this point whether or not the whole sketch fits within here. I just want to focus on the entryway. And so I'm basically using the rule of thirds and some big, medium, small shapes, everything we've kind of talked about, to block out these forms. I just know I want that main gate to kind of rest at 1/3 of the image, or slightly off center even, on the left here that I have this my crosshair at right now. Alright, so I'm just kind of adjusting this. I want it to kind of align with the grid I'm drawing up a little bit. And I'm trying to make it just as interesting as I can with, the design I kind of went with and the angle. So I can lightly suggest some of these vertical shapes, the horizontal ones, but I'm quickly kind of boxing it in. It never, at least not for me, it may for some of you depending on your technique and your experience. My first sketches like this, they never look nice and clean. They never look at a level of that I present things. So again, I'll be looking at, with your assignments, we'll be looking kind of at things in 3 levels. We'll be looking at both your design in terms of the what you actually drew. We'll be looking at your technique. How well did you draw something, and then overall the presentation level of everything. Is it clean? Could you show this to a client? Could you show it to me? I want you to be proud of what you do, what you turn in and kind of work on each week. And I think that's just such a huge part of it, is to be give everything your best. If you've never drawn before, it's going to take you maybe a couple more weeks to kind of get there than others. But this is a class for everybody, and I want you to first and foremost have fun, to kind of take in some new information, and then try to apply that. And then if you have time, of course, you can go back and make things look nicer.